This is the 2021.06, so the second quarter of this year. We do quarterly releases, kind of a comprehensive release, including the core platform, any additions to Servoy Cloud or our extensions. And as always, we like to start with some demos, and then I'll go over the release notes and we'll get out of here. I think this webinar should be pretty quick. We had some pretty big stuff in the last release, and that webinar was a long one. In fact, it was 2 webinars. So this one, I know I say that a lot, but I really think we'll be out of here pretty quickly, just a few demos. So I'm going to show, number one, the Smart Docs editor component that we showed in prior webinars has been released, but now it's also available in the sample solution that you can download easily and see for yourself and try out. So just to make that a little bit more accessible, we added that. We are going to show, as I put in the announcement, we're going to show some drag and drop custom list views. I want to show that in the context of building regular basic list views, because this is more of an advanced topic right now, and we'll ask for your feedback on drag and drop capabilities there as well. One of our longtime and most used extensions, the SVY search module, got some enhancements, and we're going to demo those, and I'll show you a bit about client connection mode, which was a core enhancement that was added. I'll just kind of show you where it's at and what it does. Then we'll go over the release notes. We'll get out of here. So let me jump over to the demo, and I'm just going to come in here to the sample solution that is available. My first demo is really just to show you that there has been a menu item added to this called Document Editor. And this is the same, really the same example that I showed in the past webinar. So I'm not going to go through this again because you can watch this in a prior webinar, and many of you have already probably seen it. But just to let you know that you can actually just download the sample solution. The document editor is ready to go with a sample document in there. You can experiment with the print preview, and you can also experiment with playing with the tags and the merge tag and all that capability. So that's not really a demo, but I just wanted to show you that I downloaded the sample this morning. So I build these samples pretty much in the morning of the webinar, and this one I just downloaded it, and it's there and it's working. I added my 2 other demos to it. The next demo in our agenda here is really the drag and drop list view, but I want to put that in the context of basic list views. We did a whole webinar on this topic. So if you go to the tech series homepage, so it's servoy.com, I think, /webinars tech series, you get a list of these old webinars, and I think, or not all of them are old, but building list views we did, I think, last year or so. And so this actually shows how to make nice list views with a WYSIWYG editor in just a few minutes. So go back and watch that one if you're interested. Just to show you real quick, I have sort of a WYSIWYG list here of product order information, and I want to show what that looks like in the designer. We have a feature called a form component. It's just like a form, except that it has no scripting scope, unlike a form. But I made an orders list form component here, so I can drag, drop, make this data bound, style it with CSS, etc. And then in my orders list view, sorry, this is the form component. In my orders list view, I can go to the list form component, and if I expand this, it shows all the ones that I've already made. So if you go and you drag one of these on the form, it'll just pop it on there, ready to go, and you can interact with all the properties and the events and everything with that. So I am showing this not because this is the main focus of the webinar. I'm showing this to many people have a lot of experience in Servoy in these webinars, but we have some people that are new at Servoy or even just evaluating it. And I didn't want to give the impression that you are required to do the next thing I'm going to show to get a list view. I wanted to show you that building a list view is really easy. You just drag, drop, and script. The next thing I'm going to show is our advanced renderers component. This is a component that is kind of a building block for other more complex components. So let me switch back to the running client here and first look at like our orders list here with the pop-up filter. So if I click here on the filter and I want to filter by customer or something, there's this kind of list that sticks in here in the filter. That's where this one component comes in. It's sort of like a building block for more complex components, and we've tried to discourage people from using it directly because it's really meant for very specific stuff, and it's a little bit more complicated to use. However, we had a requirement for a drag and drop type list, and we decided to enhance this to facilitate that. And I wanted to show you that. So if you do have that requirement, we don't want to hold you back, and then also get your opinion on drag and drop capabilities and your requirements for those. So I'm going to click here on the drag and drop list menu item. And what I have here is a sample solution. On that components repository, the sample solution is available. I just sort of poached it and stuck it into the navigation structure here, and it just works. But essentially my use case is, well, I got my products table, I'm filtering on the product category here. And suppose that I just want to move products into another category. Suppose that I decide that for whatever reason, chai is not a beverage anymore. It's a condiment or a produce, right? So I'm going to go ahead and drag this from this list into this list, stick it anywhere that I want. You can see that things reorder as I hover over and drop it in there. And so now it belongs in the produce category. I could change my mind and remove it and drag it back here and drop it there. Another use case could just be a sort reorder. So maybe you have some cards that you want to allow the user to just sort to their own preference, and you save that somewhere. So I could click and just reorder some of these and store it in my sort index or something like that. So that's kind of a list view drag and drop example. I'm sure you can think of your own use cases, like dragging products onto an order to make a picker kind of thing, or whatever it might be. So I'll take you a bit into the IDE, and we'll look under the hood. Again, this one's a bit more advanced, so there's going to be some stuff I'm going to skip related to this component, and just get to the drag and drop stuff. And you can post any questions you have in the chat as I go. So I'm going to I'll close all of these and find that form here. I think it was called something drag. Found that drag and drop. There it is. And when we look at the editor of this form, you'll see that there's two components that are on the form, one for each list. Sorry, it always takes a while to render the form editor when Zoom is running. But here they are. These are the advanced renderers, and I'll show you where to get that on the palette. Let me see. Filter here. Yes, under visualization. There's custom list and found set list. They're basically the same. The difference between them is that the found set list can be bound to a backend data source. So if I select one of these, you can see that the found set here is the product's data source, and I've selected the data providers that are going to show there. Also, you'll notice that I have drag enabled set to true. So this is a new property there. Drop enabled set to true. And then farther down here, you can see that there are a couple of new events. One is on drop, and the other one is on sort end. So these are the final events when you drop an item on here, or you reorder an item from within the same list. So let's go ahead and jump into this method. And I'm really just going to kind of show you the method signature. You can see I was just printing a lot of stuff out to the console. But the thing to focus on here is the method signature. So it passes in the event object, which comes with any UI event. And then it tells you kind of like the index in the destination and the index in the target where it's dropped. the actual record or records that were moved. So I could do a shift click. I don't know if I have that enabled in this sample. Let me see. Yeah, I do. So I did a shift or a control click here. Now I've grabbed 2 of them, and I can drop 1, 2 over here into the target. So that's how you get an array of record objects that were moved. So the list is really just a rendered view of the model, but the actual drop event does nothing to the model. It just renders it in the list, and then you have to catch it in this event and then update your model however you like. So it doesn't, automatically move the product into a new category in the database or automatically change the value of the sort column, right? So that would be convenient. However, there would be no way to predict what you want. So in this case, it just passes this stuff in. And here you can see that on this line 258, we're updating the category ID of the record that was moved into the new category filter that is set. And then we just refilter the list so that it all matches up. Again, this puts the state of the model back in sync with the state of the view. Again, this is kind of an advanced component, so I'm not going to get into all of the details in the code in this example. All of the code that's here is also in the example solution that is in that repository, and that's a standard component you can add through the package manager. So that is the custom drag and drop demo. Again, that's the advanced renderers component that you can add. The other demo that I wanted to give was there was a small enhancement to SVY search, but I thought any excuse I can get to demo that extension, I do, because it's very flexible, and I find that people are, even if they've been using it for a long time, they learn new ways to use it. So it's always good to revisit it. And I think it's telling that such a mature extension we have still gets feature requests coming in even now. The feature request that came in was, hey, I have to put, if I put in the search here a number, it's only matching exactly that number. So actually, let me disable some code and show you the way it was working. I think this is on show for the first orders list. I should have set it to, and then uncommented it, but I forgot to do that. So the first time this form shows, I'm setting some stuff here, but let's comment that out. We'll show you the way that it works by default. Okay. So coming back here and looking at the orders, you can see that if I were to type in like an invoice number or an order number, like 10249, it finds it, right? But or 10250, it's matching on this ID here. But the request came in that, well, suppose I want to find all the order numbers that start with 1025, right? I should be able to enter that, but then it doesn't match. So the default behavior, because order ID is an integer in the database, it says, well, that's numeric, so we're going to treat it strictly like number and only do an exact match. You probably could do, I don't know, something like this. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's probably matching on something else that's greater than 1025. But you'd have to play with it, and it's not intuitive to the user. That's the point. The user expects to type a string fragment and get results. So we added a simple method to the SVY search, which is called setCastInteger, and it's a Boolean. So by default, we're no default behavior changes, but if you set that to true on the search provider, so that's an individual column that's searched, then it will try to cast it as a string and match on it with all the other string operators that might be in play. I'm going to comment out this one as well, save that, and I didn't check for first show, so in theory, I should probably relaunch it. I'm going to relaunch this one more time. And when we come into that orders view, we should see the expected behavior now, which would be that I can sort on or search on the order ID as if it were a string. So now I got my list of orders here, and I'm going to put in 1025. So now you can see I have, anything 10, 250, 251, etc. And if you look down at the bottom, I get this 11025. Well, what is that? That's because it contains the 1025, but it doesn't start with that. So I could come in and set the string matching to starts with, and then it will just match those ones that are starting with the 1025. That's an older property, but I put that in here to show that once you cast this to set that this search provider casts to a string, all the other string matching settings, case sensitivity, not that that matters with numbers, all of that stuff applies and is respected as you have it. The other thing that's worth pointing out is that you can put spaces in, and all of the additional search terms apply. So if I wanted to do Brazil, so now I get all of the invoice numbers in that range that were shipped to Brazil, or maybe let's see, we have a mix of 2019, 2020, and 21 on the ship date. I could just put in 2021, which is also a nice enhancement from the last release of this. And now I get those there. So I did that by setting that ship date was implied. By default, date columns are ignored unless you explicitly type, like shipped date, like that, or whatever the alias is, and then the value. But you don't have to do that if you set it to be an implied search. It'll do it by default. You get 2020, etc. So those search terms work together just like if it were a string. So that's also really nice. So I want to thank the person that submitted that feature request, because I think other people had noticed that as well, and we're happy to pick that up and release that with this quarterly release. There
Sean,
is, yeah,
a couple of questions about this.
Yeah.
The cast to string. Does it work on dates too?
No, it's the new property is called cast integer or set cast integer. So it only applies to integer columns, because oftentimes integers, they can represent like something that's truly numeric, but often they're used for like IDs or order numbers or invoice numbers or something. So this is meant to specifically treat them like strings. For dates, though, that's a good question. There is already date format support. So you could see that when I put in 2020, I can get rid of the invoice number part. When I put in 2020, that's implicitly working on ship date here, by the way, because I had set it up that way. But it's showing all of the orders that were shipped in 2020 or 2021, right, or 2019. You can see that that those all match there. There's already a date format. If you look at, I think in the base of this, this is extending something, but that's already kind of plugged in. If we look at this particular form in the sample, it's extending all of those grids. One of the tutorials based on this sample is just to quickly build a grid. And I think on the load or on the show, it probably sets the allowed formats. Yeah, so here's all the date formats, and that's also part of the SVY search API. This is a sample solution which uses the toolbar filter and the grids, which is all kind of a bunch of extensions working together. At the heart of that search, though, is that simple search API, which allows you to just get in there and set your date formats. So you can set what's an acceptable format. I could come in here and also do, I'll try something off script here. Let's try 3107-2019. So that matches exactly there. So that's already can be treated like a string. And you can do the year as well. That's nice. Good question. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I got one other question about the found set custom list. Do they allow infinite scroll?
Yeah, I'm glad that that was asked as well, because so that's about the lists here, which are, these are bound to found sets. Now there's only, you know, a finite number of products in each of these categories. One of the main use cases of this particular component is the infinite scrolling. So yeah, the answer is yes, because the normal WYSIWYG list that you see here, this will do the pagination at the bottom. So you'll get to the end of the viewport, and then there will be a little arrow to go to the next page and the next page. So this overcomes that limitation. We're able to, with this one, because it's kind of like a custom component template, we're able to overcome some of the limitations in the normal list view. But one of the poll questions there is about the drag and drop that you saw, because we have looked into a little bit into drag and drop in other realms in our components. It's definitely more difficult to implement, and we'd like to get your feedback on the requirements on that.
Cool.
Good questions. Thanks, guys. There was one question there. What font are we using on these forms? I don't know offhand, but you can run the sample at sample.servoy.com and right click and inspect element, and and you can check out the font. So let's go on to one more demo here, and this was the the client connection mode. This is more of like an info than a demo. Let me close all these. Sure, save. So there was one other enhancement that I wanted to highlight, and I'll go over the release notes in a minute and get in the nuts and bolts. But one other one that's worth highlighting is something called client connection mode for data sources. And there's a couple use cases for this, but I just sort of want to highlight how it works. So I've created, I've used one of the custom connectors, in this case, the Facebook connector. Here you can see I use the Facebook driver, and there are, you can access more than 100 of these types of custom connectors for, you know, cloud services, e-commerce platforms, SAP, Facebook, LinkedIn, HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever. We have lots of them available, and they basically provide database access to what is not a database. So you can see the tables here for Facebook. You can see the views. If there are any other APIs, they can be exposed to procedures directly. And so it's really simple to create a connection to the service and treat it like any other data source in Servoy. The challenge is, and this is a technical explanation, so bear with me here. The challenge is, and you can see it in the advanced properties here, Servoy does connection pooling on data sources. So, and that's a way to greatly increase efficiency on the database, because many clients can share just a few connections and do that very efficiently. However, if you think about the way that these might work in a multi-tenant or multi-user environment, each connection here and the data source is a bit dependent on some connection properties. And those need to be set dynamically after the user authenticates to the service. So I don't want to get into the whole OAuth, but this is what sort of was driving this feature request. But it's not the first time we heard it. So now what we allow you to do is kind of map a data source to a single client. And then you get a dedicated connection, and you can runtime set properties on that. So I'm just going to punch this into the command console to show it, because to demo it is a little bit cumbersome, and there's nothing to see. It's just, you know, switching the connection. So you start by going to the data sources API. You pick your data source. In this case, I'm going to do db and then the Facebook connector. And then there's this new new API on any data source called define client connection, any DB data source. And you call define client connection, and then that's like a builder. And then you can start to do things to it. So you can set the password, username and password, so you can change the credentials that are used to connect. You can also call this one, which is set property, and then you just put in name value pairs. And all of these connectors, both sort of custom, the CData connectors and any other database, have a whole range of custom properties that you can set. And now you can take advantage of that and just pass that in at the very end. And you can keep calling set. This is like a call chaining. But at the very end, you call create, and that is what creates the new dedicated connection. And then you can also destroy it if you want to do some cleanup. So that is a nice new feature. I want to highlight a couple of the use cases. Are some database vendors do multi-tenancy this way. So you actually want to change the connection properties for multi-tenancy. I think Oracle and OpenEdge Progress do that. So now we support their native multi-tenancy based on connection properties, as well as allowing the CData connectors to be multi-tenant for various social platforms, etc. One caveat to this is that you get a dedicated client connection, so that can put more load on a real database. On the Facebook connector, it doesn't matter because that goes to API. But a real database like Oracle or something, normally we could share 30 connections for 300 clients. Now, if you have 300 clients and they all do this, that's 300 connections. So that's something to keep in mind. So yeah, that's not like a awesome demo, but it's hard to demo something like that. But I wanted to just sort of highlight that, because if you are using those CData connectors, or you use OpenEdge Progress or Oracle for multi-tenancy, and I think there's probably some other use cases I don't know about, that's available to you in this release. And it's just a line of code really to do. And you want to do that like right at startup, as soon as they authenticate and you know what properties you want. So that's how you do that. There is a poll question there on the CData connectors as well. So if you could answer that for us, I would appreciate that as well. So that does it. As I said, we just have some light demos there, nothing too crazy. And let me jump back to my browser here and go through the rest of the release notes, and we can take questions as well. So yeah, I hit all those demos. Some other stuff in this release, of course, we have to talk about NG2. We've been talking about that since the beginning of the year. We announced that we are migrating the NG client itself, what it runs on, from Angular to AngularJS, which is sounds like not a big difference, but it's a complete architectural refactor. And we're doing that for you so that you don't have to. And the status on that is that all the essential components, all of the basic components that you use in almost every application, have been migrated already. There still are a few specialized ones out there, like calendars, and the Smart Docs editor that we just released last quarter and demoed is not yet ready for NG2. Those will be coming later. Also, something interesting, which is kind of internal, but all of the component source code for NG2 is now in the web package repository. So you have the NG1 and NG2 versions of those in the same repository. So when you add a component through the package manager, and then you go to run it NG2, it can pick up the NG2 sources. Before, we were kind of cheating and shipping that in the IDE, like pre-bundled. So now we actually can build it from your installed packages, the way we do with NG1, so like the right way. Of course, this is a long process, and our R&D team has been hard at work on this for like 2 years at least. But I want to look ahead. In the next quarter release, we hope to have the form designer, the actual editor, WYSIWYG editor, migrated to be running and supporting NG2 components. So we really focused on what actually happens in the client so that people can release as soon as possible. And now as we wrap that work up, we go in and improve the developer experience. We will port more components over, including things like PDF Viewer, Calendar, Google Charts. These are more specialized components that not everyone is using. So we'll be continuing that work. And by the end of the year, we will have this hardened for production use, so people can feel confident to put their application actually in production in NG2, because the end of life for NG1, the underlying framework is at the end of the year. So at that point, it goes unsupported. We will be acquiring a long-term support contract on NG1, so it doesn't mean that you have to migrate by the end of the year. We just want to make it possible for those who want to be ahead of the curve. And also, there are folks who make their own components. Servoy's web package architecture is open, so people can make their own web components. You're kind of on your own to migrate those to NG2, but we hope to provide some help with that in terms of documentation and best practices. So we'll be looking to do that later this year as well. Some other performance updates in the core platform that I didn't demo that are still worth mentioning. We made some performance updates. One is related to something called batching mode. So this is the scenario where the user maybe has generated a lot of new records in the same data source, and before they save it, or when they save it, the way it works by default is those are all kind of discrete SQL statements. And so that doesn't take advantage of the benefit of batching those all in one transaction. So there is a property. So the default is it doesn't change, but there is a property that if you put this in your properties file, statement batching equal to true, then when you're saving records to the same data source in one go, it will actually treat that like a transaction and kind of bundle those together in a bulk insert. So that can improve performance greatly for big record inserts. There is one thing to consider, and that it treats it like a transaction mode. So if one record fails, they all fail. It used to be that, or when it's set to false, and you're building up new records and record changes, and then you save. If one of those fails, it gets marked as failed, but any ones before that succeeded still go to the database. You of course could have already done that in transaction in code, but this sort of kind of just does it automatically if you set statement batching to true. So that's available for you. I recommend that you don't really just turn it on willy-nilly, but if you do see performance problems, like you have a use case where a user or in code could be building up a lot of inserts to the same data source, and it feels like that's slow, there's a way to overcome that. Excuse me. Another performance update. We have another config property which allows you to kind of bypass the table filters when you're loading records with primary key values. So this is another config property that you can sneak in there. Again, there's no change to the default. So if you ignore what I'm saying, nothing new will happen when you run this. But it does allow you to, if you disable this and set it to false, it allows you to skip the requeries against the table filters when you're loading records by primary key. So that's another thing. Again, this is like a real edge case, but it's good to know that it's there if you see a performance issue when you have table filters and you're calling load records by PK. Another performance update has to do with data broadcast and notification of data changes and new records. So typically what happens is a new record is made on either in your client or in another client, and you receive a data broadcast from someone else. And then found sets, so these cached or these data sets that we have that manage the cache, they are requerying to make sure that record shows up. I mean, that's Servoy data broadcasting, so one of our really nice features. That does have an overhead because the client has to figure out which found sets to update, so which ones could have that record. We have greatly optimized how that works, limiting the number of checks that it needs to make when that happens. So this is a change which is sort of like you've been opted in already. So in this case, there is a change. You shouldn't notice anything other than better performance. However, in a really complicated scenario, it's still possible that you would get a stale cache on a new record. So suppose there's a new record from another client and you have some crazy relation or something happening, or chain together relations. I suppose it's possible that still that record doesn't show up with the broadcast. In that case, you could disable this and set it back to false, which would revert it to what it was like in the previous versions, but you would miss out on the optimization. Okay, that's it for core changes that have to do with performance. Those are all kind of edge cases, but they're good to know about. I demoed the client connection mode just kind of to explain that. So we now enable one-to-one connections for a data source per client. So this allows you to really get flexible with what you want to set for connection properties to a data source and have that just be for one client. You should understand that when you do this for a real database, that it can reduce the efficiency that you get by connection pooling. So you just want to keep that in mind if you have a really high number of users and you choose to use this for all of them. Yeah, I mentioned the use cases, particularly any of our custom CData connectors, Oracle, multi-tenancy, OpenEdge multi-tenancy. That's what we use that for. There is a new solution event that we added. It's called on before login. And so this gets called, let me show you really quickly in here. So if you look at the solution events, here it is right here, on before login. This gets called prior to the solution authentication happening, right before login on a successful login. And so that allows you to now handle deep link arguments. So these would be arguments that you actually put in the URL. If you're deep linking from somewhere else, and say an email that you sent that says, we want you to approve this invoice or something, and then you click it and you want to handle the deep link and then navigate directly to that record, right? From a URL. If you want to do something like that, you probably want to figure that out. You know, you maybe still have to authenticate, but then you need to know where you're going. It used to be that you could only handle those in the login solution, which was a separate solution dedicated to the login flow. This essentially lets you handle it in the pre-login event and set whatever state you need, and then move on, and you don't need that sort of more heavy login solution. You can do it just with a login form. So there's two properties on the solution here. There's a login solution name. And if you don't set that, there's a solution login form. You can do one or the other. The login solution is kind of a legacy thing now, going back to our desktop smart client. So going forward, we might deprecate that because it's not really needed. If you still use it, it won't break, but we might hide it for new stuff. So just to let you know that. But you can try this out on before login solution event, handle deep link args. You can skip the whole login solution and just use the form. Hope that's clear. We actually updated pretty much all the main extensions because of NG2. So now if you look at all the extensions, you will see a bump in the version, or you would have seen it in the past month during the release candidate period, that makes them compatible with NG2 and actually puts the source code in that repository and bumps the version. So that was done on the pathway to NG2, so you will see that they're all updated. But we also had some enhancements. Again, the SmartDoc editor component, which you can install through the package manager, that's also available in the sample solution. So go to the sample solution to look at how that works. We have the integer types, which or the integer cast to string, which I just demoed, and we have the advanced renderers were updated, which I just demoed. Again, that advanced renderers is for advanced use. We recommend that you use the list form component to build most lists, but if you want drag and drop lists, you can do it today with those. Okay, I'm going to leave the useful links up. Thank you all for your attention, and we'll take the remaining questions, and please again ask that you guys fill out that poll if you haven't already. Rutger, how do we do?
Quite good. A couple of questions. Somebody is asking about the status of the NG desktop client, especially the customization of the installer. Is there an update? Is there something to say?
Oh, yeah. I might have to take that one offline, so I can respond to you privately. I get the list of the questions asked. I might have to respond to you privately about the customization of the installer. We have been working on the installers for NG Desktop, but I don't know that offhand.
Okay. Somebody else is asking about the possibility to write a connector for your own APIs as well.
Okay. That's a great question. So writing a connector for your own APIs, I assume that means like a non-commercial API that you want to connect to, and you want it to be seen as a database, like I did with the Facebook connector. There is a possibility for that. Again, we have a partner vendor. Our connectivity partner is CData, and they help us to embed these connectors in Servoy and make it seamless. And there's over 100 of them for lots of commercial, cloud services. And there is the possibility to create the custom connectors as well. And that's done for a fee, of course, but there's a possibility for that to have that exposed as a database and to do the optimization and stuff that they also do. So I can you can talk to me or Rutger about that, and we can evaluate to see if it's a good fit.
Okay.
If not, you can always consume web services with the REST plugin. That's the low tech way to do it, and that works in many cases.
Okay. I think one last question about Servoy Developer on OS X Big Sur. Any news about that?
I'm not a Mac user, so I don't have the first-hand experience. I know that we put out like a statement on Big Sur when it came out that there was a lot of, or there were some issues with Eclipse and Big Sur, in particular, some rendering bugs in that, and we recommended that you stay away from Big Sur. I have to follow up and see what the status of that was. It was kind of out of our hands. It was between Mac and Eclipse, basically. So I'd have to follow up on that. Certainly, I do have colleagues that do use OS X Big Sur with Servoy Developer, and I think they do some tweak or something to get around it. I'm not sure, but I'm not the best person to answer that. So I'll take that offline. Thanks.
Okay. I guess that's it for now, Sean.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all. And again, this is recorded. The sample that you saw is available at sample.servoy.com, minus the little ones that I added. And we'll see you guys next time.
Sure. Thanks, guys. Bye.